Cease to inquire what the future has in store and take as a gift whatever the day brings forth. Good evening and welcome. This is Face the Nation. Our topic of discussion today is Sri Lanka's current political climate with an emphasis on COVID-19. Joining us this evening on the show is Dr. Kitsiri Manchanaika, representing the United National Party. Also joining us tonight on the show is Iran Wickramaratne, Member of Parliament of the Samaga Jana Balawegaya, Professor Tissa Vitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka Pudujana Peramuna, as well as Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament, Councillor, Dehiwala Mount Lebanon Municipal Council. Let's start off tonight's show with Professor Tissa Vitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka Pudujana Peramuna. Professor, interestingly, over 93,000 persons have got their second jab in terms of the Oxford AstraZeneca virus so far, out of which 750,000 plus individuals are still unaccounted for as far as the second jab is concerned, including individuals like yourself. Now, does the government have a concrete plan to vaccinate the 750,000 plus individuals who have already been vaccinated with the Oxford AstraZeneca virus? Your time starts now.
Frankly, I don't know because I'm an ordinary member of Parliament. I'm not in the cabinet, and the information that is leaking out about what is going to be done or what is contemplated, there seems to be several versions. One person says one thing and another person says another thing. So I frankly don't know. You see, earlier from the Indian Institute of Immunology, which actually is a world-class body, a supply of the Oxford vaccine produced there was going to be supplied to Sri Lanka. But what has happened is that because the crisis in India has erupted to such levels that they have, in short said, they are unable to fulfill their commitment here. So the government from here had made those arrangements, and if those arrangements had materialized, you and I, we would also have been getting our second doses.
So I made a mistake initially when I introduced the AstraZeneca vaccine that was introduced. I in fact said virus, so I'm very sorry for that for that mistake I did earlier on in the show. But getting back to nuts and bolts, Professor Tissa Vitarana, with regard to the vaccination in question, has the government or is the government looking at alternatives to mix and match the second dose with another vaccine, probably the Sputnik or the Pfizer or even the Chinese vaccines for that matter?
I think they are certainly contemplating that. They are in the process of negotiating with those governments to obtain those vaccines. The problem is that they have to be registered by the authority in Sri Lanka as being suitable for use in Sri Lanka. Now, as far as I know, there is a problem or a delay in doing that because of the lack of certain items of information. You see, before you buy anything, especially even more than a medicine, a vaccine, there is a whole lot of questions which have to be considered and suitable answers provided by the supplier. Now, the conditions, minimal conditions are by the, shall we say, the experts in that field in our country laid down as the minimum requirements for the vaccine to be accepted and registered in this country.
Professor, you got the first jab now. Aren't you worried that the government does not have a plan or a concrete plan or a proper plan to give you the second jab? Because there are 750,000 plus individuals who have already got their first jab and they are on limbo.
Well, you see, I think you have to not be overcritical because I, for one, I have visited the Indian Institute of Immunology. I've had discussions with senior scientists and so on there, and I have a lot of confidence in that institution. And if they were producing that vaccine as developed in Britain in identical fashion in the Indian Institute, I would accept it as being a, shall we say, acceptable alternative to getting the Oxford vaccine direct from Britain.
Yeah, Professor, but already, as you're aware, we got the Serum Institute of India to bring down the vaccines for Sri Lankans. So we are already having the AstraZeneca vaccine in the country at the moment. And we're talking about this vaccine in question and nothing else. So right now, as you did mention before, India has a surge in the number of infected people and the number of deaths reported in India at present. So henceforth, the Serum Institute of India may not provide Sri Lanka with the required amount of vaccines for the month of May as far as the second jab is concerned. So that does worry the people, isn't it? Because if not for the second jab, then what happens next?
Shall we say, at the time, you see, now, to my knowledge, still more than 80 countries have not given even the first dose of vaccine.
Oh, that's okay because no one has got it already.
Let's put things in perspective.
Yeah.
A large number of countries are unable to provide this essential vaccine to their citizens. Sri Lanka, however, had made the arrangements with the Indian government and got the assurance that the amount of vaccine required to give the second dose would be obtained. Now, because of this sudden explosion of the COVID infection in India and the high level of deaths also, the Indian Institute is saying, look here, we have got a unexpected problem like this, and we are committed now to supply our own people who are faced with this challenge. So that information is given to our government, which had not anticipated such a development. Even India hadn't anticipated.
So what happens next?
So what happens next is we have to find an alternative source. And the discussions are going on with the Russian, with the Sputnik vaccine, with China, and so on. So an attempt is being made to fill the void that had been created by what has happened due to the explosion of the epidemic in India.
I'm going to ask a very layman question from you, Professor, before I move my attention to Iran on the same subject. If you are given the Sputnik or a Chinese vaccine or the Pfizer as a second dose in place of the AstraZeneca vaccine, would you take it, Professor?
I wouldn't take the Pfizer because it's what is called a messenger RNA vaccine. Now, no vaccine in the world has been prepared using a messenger RNA. So it's an entirely new concept which has been hurriedly developed in America by two companies using this novel method. Now, if I just to again bring things down to a perspective, to develop and perfect a vaccine both from the point of view of efficacy and safety, on an average, a period of 6 to 7 years is required, because you've got to go through a whole, shall we say, program, a battery of tests, shall I say, research-wise as well as laboratory experimental-wise, which have to be gone through. Then you have to go through the animal inoculation phase. You have to go through, and that also there are different grades of animals coming up to the larger, more human type animals, and then you go to the trials in humans. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, right? That's why all that time is required. Now here we are having a situation where just in a period of 1 year or so of a completely new virus introduced to the world, right? Probably due to genetic shall we say, changes of a virus that was infecting bats as a species earlier, because most of the coronavirus that have evolved into infecting humans, for instance, one of the causes of the common cold is also a coronavirus, and that's it amounts to about 21%, if my memory serves me correct, of the causes of the common cold. Right. So, you see, the issue here is that this vaccine has been rushed, and when a completely new procedure which has not been used before in the production of vaccines, which I got even from the time of the smallpox vaccine or earlier, the procedures have been quite different. So I won't go for the Pfizer. But the other two I would consider, because the Sputnik is a replication of what has been done in Oxford.
Right. Thank you very much. Professor Tisivitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. An open-ended question to you, Professor. I want a yes or a no, because I want to quickly move to Iran. Don't you think the government should have used the 1 million vaccines that it got from India more prudently? Probably only vaccinated 500,000 people, had a buffer of 500,000 more, and then move on to a system like that. A yes or a no only, and then I'll grill you further as the discussion progresses.
No, I'm surprised that you ask me a question like that. Let me tell you, because in this business of doing science, there is no black and white you work on the basis of hard facts and make suitable adjustments. And you may come to one conclusion today, and further research may down the line may show that there was something missed out earlier, and therefore you have to change. Right? So the situation has changed, as I mentioned to you, in the way that the Indian epidemic surged up. And therefore, the government had to take a certain decision.
Right. Thank you very much, Professor Tissa Vitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Iran Wickramaratne, Member of Parliament of the Samaga Jana Balawegaya. Iran, interestingly, do you think India will remain committed to providing the vaccines required for Sri Lanka, given the fact that Sri Lanka is now moving a little bit towards, or inclining a little bit towards, the Chinese government? We saw a few days ago, the China's defense minister was in the country. We are having close ties with the Chinese government at present. We know the Economic Commission Bill of the Port City is going to be tabled in Parliament in a few days from now. Again, inclining towards the Chinese government. Do you think the Indian government will remain committed to providing the vaccines for Sri Lankans, at least for the 750,000 plus individuals who have got their first jab?
Thank you for inviting me to be here. Now, I would like to think that the Indian government will be committed and that vaccinating our population will not be determined by geopolitical competition. I would like to think like that, and that they would be committed. However, I think that they have a real problem on their hands. They have a surge of this virus. And like any government would be, I think their first loyalty will be to their own citizens and vaccinating their own citizens. So even though there are commitments, the issue here is really timing issues now. You know, when will this actually happen? And as you know, the shortage in India on the vaccines runs into multiple hundreds of millions, you see. And so at the moment, despite what we hear in the media, government spokesman saying, I can't just see the vaccines coming in.
Iran, have you got your first jab?
I got my first jab, yes.
Aren't you worried that the second jab is not even spoken about concretely by the government? I got my first jab as well.
Yes.
I am worried, and I'm worried for the 750,000 plus individuals, just like you and Professor Tissa Vitarana, who's not yet been given a green light by the government for a second jab.
Yes, so if I have to be honest with you, I was one of the first to take the first jab, and as it was open to the members of parliament, and the main reason I took that first jab was because I wanted to send a clear message that we really need to, come on the side of science. Because we found a lots of things happening, all over the place, people thinking that there were many different answers to the response to the Corona-19 and the COVID and, Pani-Botal and various things, and parliamentarians associated with this. And I thought that that's not good. People need to have the confidence that, okay, as Professor Tissa Vitarana explained, there are limitations. This is a sudden virus. All these vaccines have been invented within a year, and these take 5 to 6 years to stabilize. All that given, but still the question is, are you better off with the vaccine, or are you worse off without the vaccine? And I came on the side that, okay, while we know that these are relatively untested, we don't know what all the side effects will be, we don't know the exact rate of effectiveness, I came on the side that it's better to be on the side of science, and that people will get the confidence to go and take the vaccine. And that's why I volunteered myself to go right up front and take the vaccine. Now the question about if I don't have the second vaccine.
Now, do you regret that decision now because the government doesn't have a concrete plan to get the second jab in place?
No, I don't regret the decision now, because I think the right thing is to vaccinate the whole country. On the 25th of February, I was on a program like this on a channel, and there was a professor from the SLPP, Ranjit Bandara, if I can name him, and he said, we want to be the first vaccinated nation, you see, and that was on the 25th of February. So we are far from being the most vaccinated nation. Now there may be a difference of perspective here. Sometimes we can say things like, you know, there are 80 countries which haven't vaccinated their population and so forth. I have a different perspective. I always try to compare ourselves to the top 10. That's the way I think about the country. That's the way I think the country should be. And I wouldn't want to be in the first top 10 who are being vaccinated. Sri Lanka is a small population, small country, right? And the whole issue is, you know, trying to think through, stay ahead of the game. If the decision is to vaccinate, right, and if scientists say that, if the our National Medicines Regulatory Authority says that these vaccines are suitable, they are approved, we should take it, then I'm all for it and I want to go for it. And if that's the case, I don't want to be in a situation where just the medical profession, health workers, politicians are vaccinated and others are not vaccinated. The individual can make a decision if you want to be vaccinated or not. But from the country's point of view, I think the vaccine should be available to everyone.
No, in a layman's point of view, Iran, you know, I understand where you're coming from and why it's important to get a vaccine in the country. There is no question about that, because we saw the manner in which how these tonics came into play a few months ago in the country. As a result of that, people were inclined to go and even buy these tonics, indigenous tonics. But right now, we know the solution is to be vaccinated and get vaccinated. But the point is, now the government is looking at mixing and matching with other vaccines. Now the discussion is about mixing and matching with the Sputnik vaccine, the Russian vaccine in the country. Would you take it?
No, I wouldn't. You see, I think there's a lot of confusion here, right? We are laymen. We are not scientists. We are not doctors. We are laymen. But we all have some common sense, right? If I get a vaccine, a particular vaccine, and it says that I have to take a booster or I have to take a second vaccine, I would certainly, common sense tells me, take the same vaccine. Don't go and take it from another source. There's a lot of confusion here. And this is a country in which there are 3 health ministers. One is a lawyer, one is a specialist doctor, one is a professor, and still we have a lot of confusion. This is amazing, the amount of confusion. And if you just look at it from a common sense point of view, right, if you have 22 million people and you have to vaccinate 75% of that population, it's just about 16 million people. You need only 32 million vaccines, right? Even from a cost point of view, it's nothing. It's nothing from a cost point of view. You see, because a vaccine was contracted in the Asian subcontinent at $4.25, an Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So let's assume Sri Lanka contracted at $5 a vaccine, right? So 16 million vaccines is 16 billion rupees. 16 billion rupees is the money we forwent in reducing the taxes on sugar. If we take fertilizer, which is a discussion this week, right, the ban on chemical fertilizers, we are spending, depending on the exchange rate and the amounts we import, between 60 to 80 billion rupees. So what are we talking about? Everybody knows the priority is COVID and to be immunized against COVID. So this vaccine, right, the whole world knows. You don't have to be a scientist, you don't have to be an economist, right? An 18-year-old A-level student will tell you, right, there is an issue if vaccinations are going to be in demand in the whole world. Supplies are going to be restricted. I'm saying even before the rise, common sense will tell you. What would you do? If the decision is to vaccinate, you would order the vaccine and pay for it, right? That's what you would do. It's common sense. But that hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. Now the same common sense tells you there are no ICU beds in the country at the moment, right? There are no ICU beds. If somebody has a heart attack or paralysis and they are taken, everything is full up at the moment, right? So you need more ICU beds. This is common sense, right? then I will leave it to the experts. How do you do it? Whether you have mobile field hospitals, whether you have HDUs, whether you have decentralized ICUs, or whether you have a central ICU for COVID patients, those are for experts to decide. But common sense will tell you that the capacity needs to be increased. You don't wait till it happens. So that should be done even now.
Right, thank you very much, Eran Wickramaratne, a Member of Parliament of the Samag Jana Balawegaya. Just for full disclosure, we have four panelists today. None of them, only one of them is an expert in the field of medicine, and the other three are professionals, including politicians. And none of the journalists here today are medical experts either. We are journalists asking the questions that you want to be answered in the eyes of the politicians as well as experts. Henceforth, remember to take whatever the politicians and the experts are saying with a pinch of salt, and also consult your medical professionals when it comes to whether or not mix and matching your vaccines and so on and so forth are concerned. So leaving at that, I want to drag my attention to Mr. Kesara Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament, Councillor, Dehavala Mount Lebanon Municipal Council. Mr. Gunasekara, interestingly, there was clusters that we were talking about a few months ago. We were talking about the Paliagoda cluster, the fish market cluster, the cluster with regard to the Brandix garment factory, the Minuwangoda cluster. However, now we're talking about a New Year cluster without having any geographical location as such. We're talking about a New Year cluster at present without admitting the fact that the virus has now spread in the community. Why is that?
To some degree, yeah.
Why? Does the government fear that they may lose a future election? Do they fear that they will lose the popularity that they have in place right now? Or have they already lost that popularity?
No, it's something like this. You know, I fundamentally feel that there are several aspects to this whole issue. Number one, Sri Lankan people, I would say, are not committed to health protocols generally, and as a result, you have a problem. Even if the government or the health ministry says certain things, they don't follow it to the letter. True enough, they did follow to a certain degree last year, but thereafter everything was relaxed, and therefore things are fundamentally moving out of hand. And to add to that, some of the educated people, some of the intelligent people are also not following health protocols. Where do we stand? And if the intelligent people of this country, the educated people of this country, are also not taking it seriously. Now just imagine, since February or March last year, I have not gone anywhere on trips, nothing. Why? Because I feel we need to protect ourselves. For the sake of the community, you have to do that. But the slightest chance, people are going all over, including politicians, including ministers. They go for weddings, they go for parties without masks, and those things get reported on social media. Why? Totally responsible. I mean, you can't blame governments for that. It is absolutely responsibility. I don't want to mention names, but if I go to mention names, top people I have seen attending weddings, parties, etc., no health protocols. So you see, it is very sad. And if that happens, it's natural that we'll have a community spread. And that, I think it has started. As to whether we can control it, still, are we committed to that? We should be committed.
Mr. Gunasekara, a few years ago, the Bharatiya Janata Party, our closest neighbor, had elections where Narendra Modi secured a resounding victory at the elections. However, just a few days ago at the local government elections, in Tamil Nadu, the BJP suffered one of its major losses, and as a result of that, the Dravida Munnetra Kalagam party, which was launched by Karunanidhi, won a majority and henceforth secured its seat in Tamil Nadu right now. The reason being cited in foreign media is the way in which COVID-19 was handled or tackled by the BJP government. Do you think the same fate may befell the SLPP as well in the longer run if they do not hand?
No, with regard to India, I must tell you that India is a worse picture of Sri Lanka, worse. I mean, people, most of them do not even understand what COVID is. And as a result, they don't, no mask, nothing. So naturally, no government can step in and do various things, you know. It's a different environment, it's a different culture altogether. It's a different culture, it's not that easy. But in Sri Lanka, we can do certain things. If we start following health protocols, we can bring it under control. But the question is, why did we relax? My question is, why relax things? You have to keep it on, you know, that's very essential. You don't do that. When you relax, you are in trouble. I mean, during the New Year's festival season, we saw, no, everything was reported.
But who was responsible to have a tight fist on all these matters? Wasn't it the government?
The government was responsible, but I don't think they did throw out certain instructions, but then people did not follow, that's all. I feel that we have come to that situation where we feel we can still manage, you know, but I don't think it's very serious. It could turn out to be disastrous unless we take action immediately. Now, since yesterday or day before, certain precautions have been taken, certain regulations have been brought into existence so that for at least 2-3 weeks we'll have a semi-lockdown situation.
So you are saying the most prudent decision to take right now by the law enforcement authorities, including the government, is to at least go for a semi-island-wide lockdown?
It has to be. It has to be. That's very essential. That is the only way you can find out whether you can control it or not. I mean, I feel that if you look at the picture, it has spread to certain areas, but with a semi-lockdown, you will be able to. The question is, whatever the government does, if the people are not going to follow, we are in serious trouble. I feel that is more or less the case in this country.
Mr. Gunasegara, one final question before I move my attention to Kitsari Mantanaka, representing the United National Party. What is the position of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party with regard to the way in which the government is handling its affairs right now in terms of fighting COVID-19? Because they seem to be a bit silent about COVID-19. They seem to be having more priorities right now in their basket, in their plate, as we speak.
Of course, we continue to have discussions with the major party, and we try to iron out things. It's not an easy exercise, but we continue to do that.
The party, the SLPP is not listening, is it?
No, I didn't say that. I wouldn't say that.
You said you're trying to iron out issues.
It's a discussion. It's always a discussion. He's also the same thing. It's on the same wavelength, you know. But you continue to. Yeah, continue.
SLFP, we happen to be in an alliance.
So we have
to keep on bargaining.
We have to keep on bargaining. That's the only way. But I must tell you now.
But if the government is not listening, what is the point of bargaining?
No, the question is this, you know, outside world, it may appear that they are not listening. No, I don't think so.
They're listening?
No, they have to listen.
Are they?
They have to listen, because if they don't listen, they will be in serious trouble.
I usually don't do this, but I just want to ask Professor Nishnavitarana a question. Do they really listen, Professor?
Yes and no.
May I say something? I could not complete. I still feel, now if you take the other countries, now take the case of Australia, New Zealand, they have not even started their vaccination program. Where I still feel that we started it too early. This is my view. I may be wrong, But I still feel we started too early.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kesaralal Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament Council, Devala Mount Municipal Council. Dr. Kitsiri Manchanayaka, United National Party. Dr. Kitsiri Manchanayaka is a PhD holder and not an MBBS doctor. So just to give some disclosure on that as well before we start drilling you on COVID-19. What is the stand of the UNP with regard to fighting COVID-19?
Samir, first of all, I would like to thank you and your team and MTV inviting for another Face the Nation program. Actually, first of all, I would like to say government is failed handling the COVID-19 in every aspect. So they are not listening to the expert advice. So before this single New Year, I can remember medical team and association, they told them to the government to at least do a partly lockdown, but they didn't listen at all. So then again, many times, so many medical advisors wanted to do at least some sort of a control, but government didn't do that. So in the New Year time, people were freely, they were doing their shopping and all they went to Nuvarelia and the hotels and various places they went to spend their holidays. But we have seen, as Kesaralal Gunasekara correctly mentions, they were not wearing masks, they were not taking any precautions. It's like they didn't have a feeling that whether we had a COVID sort of thing in Sri Lanka. So such a bad feeling they had. So now government got to know that after single New Year, I don't know where there are various rumors are going on, they want to avoid May Day, they want to avoid these the port city issues, so that's why they wanted to start test again. They started more, then we starting become more people positive. So now it's completely uncontrollable. So it's completely spread out the entire country. It's not as you Samit correctly asked for the clusters. There's no clusters at all. Entire Sri Lanka is under that. So again, now still I don't see any precautions government is taking, because now recently I have seen in the papers, Sunday Times, so they are going to have quarantine package for Indian tourists. Right now, today news I have seen they are going to stop the people who are crossing the sea and come to Sri Lanka from South India. And again, this side they are going to give packages for quarantine. So that means we are trying to get the corona to the country. Even though they quarantine in 2 weeks in the country, what is the guarantee you have you are not getting Indian version to Sri Lanka? Who is behind this? Why the government is allowing these sort of things? Probably, I mean, what my feeling is, I mean, I have seen in my age, I have seen in 1982, when the July tension situations, the entire government ministers and deputy ministers, they were supporting the president and the prime minister to come out of it. Then I have seen during LTT time, during JV time, entire government, as a team they worked on it. But here I don't see a team. Here I don't see a team. 1 or 2% take the decision. They don't consult the experts. They don't talk to the relevant authorities. They take the decision. But I don't know whether they are taking the decisions or ignoring it. Just keep going. So that is the main reason I have seen in this government to fail. So people say that whatever the government is failed, probably different individuals are failed. So that is true. That is true. Because sometimes some ministers are sidelined. So they don't come into the, they were in during Mahinda Rajapaksa regime, they were really active and work for him. But here in this government, I don't see any single senior minister is with the president, but 1 or 2 handful people, they come and talk, but they are also not contributed. So,
but the people wanted, Kitsiri, individuals from the Viet Maga movement. When you look at the parliamentarians, the composition of the SLPP at the moment, you see a lot of professionals being given the post of a state minister. Example is Professor Channa Jayasumana has been given a top position within the health ranks at present. So are you trying to say that professionals are not doing their job, or everything is driven by politics?
So have you seen any Viet Maga people come in? I have not seen. Professor, that doctor, I have not seen. Very rarely I see him come out and speak. And even some Viet Magas are leaving. Now say ex-chairman of Satosa and the SLS, just resign and he's going back to the private sector. Why is that? So that means something wrong somewhere in the system, or from the top. Now, say this quarantine package, probably some ruling leaders' relation or friend should be behind it. Now, there was a rumor sometimes back, and I hope you can remember. So these quarantine hotels are run by some 1 or 2, 3 people. It's not given to others. Even the transport buses are given to some 2, 3 people. So that means some people say, probably it's, I don't know whether it's how far it's true. So this is also another money-making issue like sugar scam and the other whatever this thing. So they are not taking any interest at all. So responsible party, responsible government, responsible president or the prime minister, why they have not taken this precaution? Because the experts are advised just before the single New Year, please do this. Otherwise, country is going bad to us. Why they can't listen?
But why do you think the government,
Shamit, they came to power with Vyatmaga saying that we need educated people to run this country. Have you seen anywhere? Have you listened to educated people? If they have listened to educated people, this won't.
No, why do you think the government is not listening to experts?
That is the problem that I thought. Actually, personally, I am a UNP. I was supporting in the presidential election to Sajith Premadasa, right? But I thought at that time even this gentleman or the Gotabaya Rajapaksa will do a good job if he comes. I know that when Sajith comes, definitely he will do a good job. But I thought he's have some experience, we have seen something and do it. But completely failed. Just tell, even get the industry wise, because he's claiming that he's a IT guy. He's a background of IT and he's working in the IT companies in Sri Lanka. What he is doing for the IT? It's nothing. That's why I said, even for the other day-to-day operations, it's like that.
It seems to me that what the SJB camp was saying about the UNP was pulling its leg at the presidential election and was trying to switch allegiance to Gotabaya Rajapaksa at that time seems to be true, but that's a completely separate topic to discuss about on a different platform. But it seems true that the UNP was really not honest in their approach to appoint Sajith Premadasa as the leader of the leader of the country at that time. So you just said so.
I don't think so.
You just said so.
No.
You just said that you expected Gotabaya Rajapaksa to do a good job.
Okay, listen to me carefully. I expected even Gotabaya points or the Sajith. I know that Sajith will do a good job. That is 100% sure. I expected similarly Gotabaya also do a better job.
Let's leave it at that, and that's for a different day, for a different topic. Let me quickly introduce our journalist today. On to my immediate right is Nadim Majid. Immediate left is Azra. Far left is law student Sharon Benedict. So let's start off with Azra.
I would like to pose my very first question to Mr. Gunasekara. It doesn't seem like the government has a proper plan, especially when it comes to tackling this issue. We have to be very tactful about this situation right now in the country. Everybody understands that. A clear example is how the Piliyandala police jurisdiction was brought under isolation yesterday. And then, according to the opposition, due to a decision made by a certain political figure, last night in the night, they have decided to amend this decision and lift the isolation status from this police jurisdiction and only impose it to several Gramanidari divisions. So it doesn't seem like the health authorities, the experts who are supposed to make decisions about this, have the freedom to make decisions. It seems like now the politicians are trying to influence in this decision making. This is very dangerous, don't you think so?
The question is, I feel, if I may speak out openly, as far as I'm concerned, I'm part of the government. But still for all, I believe in one thing. I believe singing praises or hosannas are not going to help the government. If I feel that the government is wrong, I must say, look here, you all are wrong. Somebody has to understand. I feel right from the beginning, the government made a fundamental mistake. They should have allowed this to be tackled by the health experts. It's the health experts who can tackle this issue. And for logistical support, they could have collared in all the three forces, etc. But they didn't do that. They expected. Maybe hindsight, maybe they felt that was a better move. But still for all, now you realize that you will have problems with the politicians, because the politicians are trying to play a role. In this, you can't expect politicians to play a role, because this is health. We have to listen to the health sector. If the health sector tells us to do something, we have to follow. But if that is not happening, then it's serious. That is why you find PHIs coming on YouTube and all and saying various things. Why? Because different signals are coming out from those people. That is very wrong. That is where I feel where we are not united in this whole effort to fight COVID. We are not united.
Does it mean that the government's priority is to fix this problem? Does it mean that they have put their own...
No, the government is trying their level best, but only thing is you got to understand that on the one hand, you have a set of people who do not want to follow health protocols. The majority of them. Very simple. And at the same time, you have people who are enforcing this also not following health protocols. I don't have to mention instances. But when that happens, what can you expect?
But Mr. Gunasekara, when you say that the government is trying its best, in which aspect? When it comes to the vaccination issue, we were very ambitious. And here we are now struggling, looking for alternatives. Now we are very confident about the oxygen supply in the country. But now we see how the Indians are struggling with the lack of oxygen supply in the country. We keep talking about, even recently State Minister Dr. Sudarshini Fernandes was talking about how we should prevent contracting the disease. But it doesn't seem like the government has a plan. It doesn't seem like the government is being proactive when it comes to tackling this issue. No? Do we know if we have enough oxygen supply in the country, Mr. Gunasekara, in case there's going to be a shortage? Are we prepared for that, or are we going to wait till like we have done for the vaccine now?
No, as far as I'm concerned, as he said, Dr. Sudarshini Fernandes has been entrusted with this issue, and right from day one, she has been talking sense, and she has been saying, even to the government, look here, there are certain things you have to follow. Please follow. She has done that. The question here is, down the line, it changes. Various things do take place now. I see certain changes, even in decisions that are being taken. You say you close everything from this day onwards, but it says certain things can take place from up to the fourth night, and then thereafter it cannot take place. Those are not correct decisions, That is why I feel that we are in this situation. But generally, the government wants to somehow manage and control COVID. To do that, we need the support of the people.
Professor Tisaitan, a question that I want to ask you, because a lot of people have been asking this. Last year, when the presidential task force was appointed and the first outbreak of COVID in Sri Lanka, a fund was set up under the presidential task force called Itukama. And if I'm not mistaken, close to 1.7 billion rupees has been collected in donations from businesses, Sri Lankan citizens, the Sri Lankan diaspora overseas, or contributors. Does this fund come under your purview as the chairman of the Committee on Public Accounts? And can the government, it seems that the government is being very vague, or deliberately vague at least, in how these funds are being utilized to combat COVID?
I, as chairman of COPA, we had one session with the health ministry. There were several issues which we dealt with, but we didn't touch on this one because we're having a series of meetings thereafter, and we'll be covering perhaps that area as well. So, frankly, I don't know, because in COPA we go by the Auditor General's report on the performance of that institution and the shortcomings. Then in terms of those, we question the health authorities, and they have to say why they didn't do this or why they didn't do that.
But
So
Professor,
perhaps,
isn't it problematic that the government is not informing the public? I mean, that Etukama Fund has a website. They could publish it on that website itself. This is what we're using the money for. This is how much we're allocating for vaccine procurement. This is how much we're giving as part of the 5,000 rupee allowance for the public. That information is not being made public. And in the absence of that transparency, there is no accountability for more than 1.6 or almost 1.7 billion rupees of money that has been given by, freely given by philanthropists in Sri
I would
Lanka.
agree with you. I would prefer if the government does what you mentioned.
Professor Litana, when we were talking about earlier, when we were talking about the vaccines and the programs that were in place, there was a national vaccine rollout program under the Ministry of Health, and a spanner in the works was thrown because of this outbreak in India. Now, even if the Indian government's Vaccine Maitri program had continued, the amount of doses we would have gotten from that would have been nowhere near what was required or what is required to ensure that we have enough vaccinations to ensure herd immunity at about 80% of the population is what experts are saying. In that backdrop, my question is, why is it that the Sri Lankan authority, this is a procurement problem, why is it that the Sri Lankan authorities are always late to the party, even with this mixing and matching of vaccines? Countries that have enough doses to vaccinate their people several times over are still, they've also gone ahead and they're experimenting, they're doing research on mixing vaccines. There are clinical trials that are ongoing in the UK on mixing vaccines. Sri Lanka seems to be always late to the party, very reactive.
As a researcher for most of my working life, the value of research is not appreciated, not only by this government, but by all governments that we have had. And for instance, I don't know whether you are, where I tried to develop our industry through promoting SMEs by setting up the Vidata centers in one in every divisional secretary. I also set up a high-tech center, nanotechnology, biotechnology, electronics and so on in Homagama. To get the money for what I had to do, I had argument after argument. You know who was in charge of the finance ministry at that time. And all I was able to get was half the amount of money that I required.
When you say who was in charge of the finance ministry at the time, are you talking about the politician or the public official?
Science and technology.
Okay. Sorry, Professor Vithan, I'd like to turn my attention to Mr. Iran Wickramaratne. Mr. Wickramaratne, in your first outing in Parliament, 2010 to 15, you were a very active member of the Committee on Public Enterprises, if my memory serves me right. Right now, do you feel that you have the chairman of the Committee on Public Accounts seated to your left? Do you feel that these committees in Parliament, that Parliament's supervision of how the government is handling these crises is up to mark, is satisfactory, that Parliament's performance is satisfactory?
Yeah, the Committee on Public Accounts and the Committee on Public Enterprises are really committees which look largely at the past. So you have the Auditor General review institutions, and then those reports come in there, and they're historical reports. Largely the audits are still very much accounts-based audits. We are increasingly getting into more performance-based audits, increasingly, but still there's a long way to go. So that's what's actually happening there. in terms of what's currently happening, right, you have the committee system in Parliament. So you have the consultative committees, and the consultative committees could be a lot more effective, basically. But I don't know whether this is a consequence of the 1978 presidential constitution. Typically, members of Parliament, and this will be very interesting to do a survey, I've always thought this myself, right, have been converted in one way or the other to be a part of the executive. Because when we go into a committee like that, often we are thinking about our electorate, we are thinking about some project or some money that needs to be allocated or something that needs to be done. And we are often having the relationship with the minister chairing it because we are looking for a favor of some kind. Not a favor personally, but in terms of getting some job done. Now really, if you have a real separation of powers, right, the legislature's primary responsibility is lawmaking. That's our primary responsibility.
Mr. Wickramath, the minutiae of the systems of government and how it functions might fly over most people's head, but things like simple fixes, like what we're mentioning about, take for example the Itukama fund that was set up by a simple, there's already a website for that fund. A simple fix like mentioning this is what we're spending it on, this is how the funds have been allocated, this is how much is left. This is, I mean, those even simple fixes like that seem to, the authorities seem to be incapable of applying.
So what I'm trying to explain is the systemic issue. That fund will get audited and will eventually end up in COPA, but then it's history and you're looking at the past. What I'm trying to say is when we come into that meeting and we sit with the minister, right, we are more looking for a relationship with the minister to basically deliver on something which is more in the executive arm of government. What we should be doing is actually holding the minister responsible, because that is the responsibility of the legislator. You see, so that is why I think, and here Professor Tissavithan, who has been much longer in politics, might be able to throw some light. My study of it is, right, and in this system, we have been gradually converted a little bit more into the executive arm than being the fierce legislative arm, which is actually holding the executive responsible. So your fund, for example, if the, right, it would naturally would come to me is to question it. When I come into that meeting, I would be questioning it. I would want to know, Minister, why has this not happened? Why is the vaccination not happened? You raise some money. Where is the information on the money? You all have allowed Sinopharm to bring vaccines into the country. The National Medical Regulatory Authority hasn't approved it. What's the policy of the government? I asked this question in Parliament, and then they said it is to give the Chinese nationals. I said there are Sri Lankans living in California. Will I be able to send my penny bottle to California? I won't be able. The FDA will never approve it. So next time Indians might turn around and say, oh, we are sending some special medicine only to treat Indians in Sri Lanka. No. These are national policies. We must have confidence in our medical regulatory authority,
Professor,
and then them approving.
Professor, quite interesting facts that Iran is bringing forth. You can't. Yes, please.
What he said with regard to the system is correct, in the sense that COPA is confronted with what has happened over a period of say 6 to or maybe sometimes 10 years up to 3 years or 2 years from the present. But where the Committee on Health meeting was concerned, I did what he mentioned. The first topic on the agenda was the COVID-19 epidemic, and I spoke for about 15 to 20 minutes explaining what was the virus, how it was behaving, the issues which affected the people of the country, and I said very clearly that the epidemic is no longer following the pattern that it did initially, being isolated in pockets which were traceable to a particular individual who was infected, and that it is now begun to spread through the community. There is community spread, and once there is community spread, from the point of view of epidemiological science, there are various procedures that one has to take to do what he was saying, to have health education of the entire public, especially when there is an epidemic, from children up to the elderly. Make them realize that each and every one of them is exposed to infection now, because it is a community spread stage. And in that stage, one has to protect oneself from everyone else, your maybe your neighbor, your relations, whatever your dealings are with that person. That person may be carrying the infection, and to make matters worse, about 80% of those who are infected show no symptoms. They behave like normal people.
So what happened?
Let me finish.
Yeah.
Therefore, in that situation, I said very clearly, we have now to have a community-based approach to controlling the infection. And in brief, I mentioned what was involved in this community-based approach.
What was the government's response?
The government means the minister who was chairing the meeting said, no, it's still in clusters, it's not in the community.
Didn't you want to take a big poll and then, hit the minister question?
Which minister?
No, I'm just trying to figure out, because you're an expert. And didn't you really feel, take a big poll and go to the minister and say, why not say it again?
Through a long period of political experience, I have learned to control my temper.
Shamin, with your permission, if I can direct a question to Dr. Manchanayake. Doctor, now we see, of course, the government taking all the measures that they can to, curb the spread of this virus. We see the Samagi Janabalavegya, the leader of the Samagi Janabalavegya announced a political ceasefire. He's having discussions with various foreign delegates on bringing down vaccines and other medical supplies into Sri Lanka. What is the UNP doing on this front? I mean, you don't have a representative in Parliament.
Yes, actually.
So what really is the UNP doing?
We can't do much unofficially because we are not in the Parliament, and we are because people.
But why aren't you in Parliament? You have a seat in Parliament.
I'll come to it. So people didn't give us a mandate to get into the Parliament, but we got a bonus seat. Right? That is, we feel that.
Dr. Manchanayake, that's not a bonus seat. You got a nationalist seat in Parliament.
Exactly. It's a bonus.
So that's about 290,000 people that voted for the UNP that expect
who now
the
don't have
UNP
representation
to
in Parliament.
fulfill that duty in Parliament.
Yeah, we are going to do it. But the thing is, we can't do it hurriedly because
But Dr. Manchanayake, the country is going. Just a quick question. The country is going through several crises at the moment. There's the health crisis on one hand. There's the economic crisis. This is a time when the people of Sri Lanka need their leaders, political leaders, public officials, to step up, pull up their socks, and get the job done. How irresponsible is it for the UNP to leave that seat in Parliament vacant?
No. So you don't have to go into the Parliament to do that service. We are doing it. We are doing
How so?
So our leader and the rest of the team, just whatever the places we want, and we will.
By doing interviews on social media and talking about.
And I'll tell you the reason of the Parliament seat that I have to answer it. The reason is, actually at the beginning there was an argument to go to Parliament. So majority of the people in the party said leader to go to the parliament, he completely refused. This is the real truth. So, but down the road, then there was some people he wanted to. There are 5-6 people was trying to get into it, but then at last we decided, right? Okay, we'll have the full working committee. Then let the working committee decide it.
Now, given your reading, Kitsari, do you think Ranil Wickremesinghe is happy with Ruwan Wijewardene?
Yes, of course. I mean.
So then why not appoint...
Because he has at the beginning has mentioned...
Why not appoint Ruwan Wijewardene to the national
I think we want to get a much more mature and senior person. Therefore, Ranil Wickremesinghe will go to the parliament in June.
June?
Yeah. In next working committee, we are going to take that unanimous decision. So then June, probably in June, because we were supposed to have the working committee last week, but due to this pandemic situation, we couldn't have the working committee. But probably as soon as we meet the next working committee, we will go in June.
But now, thanks to the government, this committee meeting won't happen for at least another 1 month, 2 months.
No. We appointed full working committee in the first week of April. So we had, as you know, I mean, there's a huge 70 or 80% of our working committee people moved out from UNP and they joined. So therefore, we want to fill it. So when you fill in the working committee, you can't take people from here and there. So you have to study and get a proper people who can run the party for next 10, 20 years.
At one point, the members of the working committee was those very close to Ranil Wickremesinghe. Then it was not thought of at that time to appoint intelligent people to the working committee.
I mean, there's a mix of people.
I think Iran can add to that, if you may.
No,
at that time, 75% of the people were friends of Ranil Wickremesinghe.
No, Samir, that is also wrong.
Okay.
Leader can appoint 20 people. The rest are from each and every district, what do you call, some unions.
Close allies of Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Probably those people are close allies of Ranil Wickremesinghe. That is, I don't know, but that is the constitution says. Only leader can appoint 20. Leader can appoint anybody of 20 of them, he can nominate anybody. So that is number one. Then rest of the people are parliamentarians, minister if they are in the parliament, and senior people, sometimes the JSS chairman, and likewise there are the criteria of appointing. So now we have fulfilled the requirement at the 10th of April working committee meeting, and we were to have the 24th.
Just a question, given the fact that you are a very good administrator in the respect of whatever you're doing right now, and you've been in the private sector for some time. Don't you think it's sad that it's been nearly 2 years now that the UNP has failed to appoint someone to the parliament?
I think it's not 2 years.
Almost 1 year.
Only 6 months.
Yeah. So
only 6 months.
Isn't that sad,
Actually, yes. Once I said yes, after accepted, yes. But due to some, when a party has going a bad patch like this, there are some internal issues are there. So we have to balancely do it. So now everybody unanimously decided to go to.
I like the way you put the 6 months into perspective. How did that 6 months
October, August election was in the August 5th, I think.
Yeah,
August 5th. Now today, little more than 6 months, right? Okay. Yeah. So give me another 1 month.
How politicians?
Now that is not the burning issue in Sri Lanka now.
It
is the one, right? So that is the. So next June we will give you that good news.
So Dr. Manchanayake, you're saying that by June the working committee will unanimously approve the appointment of Ranil Wickremesinghe to the parliamentary seat?
I think so. That's the one.
And until then, in the interim, no representation for those who voted for the UNP.
I mean, just another couple of, probably 1 month more.
You really didn't answer my initial question. Yeah. I was explaining what the government is doing, what the SJB is doing, what the other political parties in parliament are doing. So my question to you again, what is the UNP doing to add to this conversation to support the national cause, which is the curbing the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic in Sri Lanka?
Actually, that's why I told you. You don't need to be in the parliament to support the government.
Okay. That's a different topic. What is the UNP doing?
So our UNP, we are doing various programs. I mean, various awareness programs within we practice it basically. In our meetings are very well organized and keep the distance and all the health regulations. Likewise, I mean, we have very limited things we can do.
Kitsari, sorry to
no, go ahead.
Sorry to pose this question with a grin on my face, but I think you're not answering Sharan's question about what your party is doing. Because your party leadership initially was to change by January. That didn't happen.
Change by what?
the leadership of the
Lanka
party
completely,
changed.
that's right.
That didn't happen.
I thought it's something of the pandemic. Yeah,
No, it's about
completely.
pandemic as well. You know, that didn't happen. By June, you're saying that Ranil Wickremesinghe would be appointed as the leader of the will still fill the vacant seat of the UNP. That invariably means that he will still hold the post of leader of the UNP.
Yes.
A party like that, can you have any faith for them to act? Now you're saying they're having meetings, social distancing meetings with 5 or 6 people maybe. What's the impact it creates?
No, the summit.
Now, as Iran said when he was in parliament a few days ago, he has spoken outright about the need to have a proper plan, concrete plan in parliament. He can do so because he's a parliamentarian. Professor Disavitharana speaks very vociferously at the health committee because he's a parliamentarian. He's not giving up that seat. But what is the UNP doing? Absolutely nothing.
We can do it in June.
No, what you all are doing is you all are going to visit MP Harin Fernando in hospital and then speak about the national issues when the leader is leaving the hospital.
Yeah.
Is that what is required from the UNP?
Give a little time.
In Sri Lanka.
Between now and June, how many more people will be infected? How many more people will pass?
I mean, that's why I'm always saying, do you need to go to the parliament to do our job?
But
no, not
they
necessary.
are able
But
to
they
do
have
their job
elected.
because they're in
So
parliament.
he's
You
elected,
have a seat
the
in
professor
parliament
is
and
elected,
you have a responsibility to act for the people, and it's not being done.
I will take that. But he's asking another question about the leader. Why you are not changing the leader? Why? Why do you want to change?
Because for 6 months the champion of Westminster Parliament and democracy.
I asked the same question the other day. Who's a better person than Ranil Wickremesinghe to lead the UNP at the moment?
Since 1994,
whoever it is that steps up to
UNP
take that
has
seat.
lost the elections back to back. Individuals like Iran Wickremesinghe, I recollect in 2008, 2009, Iran Wickremesinghe probably was one of the staunch supporters of Ranil Wickremesinghe at that time. And he probably was appointed from the national list thanks to Ranil Wickremesinghe in the year 2010. Then he was able to fight his way through and come back to parliament again. So these are staunch supporters of one-time strongman Ranil Wickremesinghe, not anymore. Now they're looking up to Sajid Premadasa as their leader.
Right. So if I am the leader of United National Party, I won't go. I have to satisfy myself who's going to be the second in command.
Let's leave
Otherwise
that.
I won't.
Shami, if I could pose one more question to Professor Disavitharana. Professor,
is it on COVID?
No, I'm moving.
All right, moving away from
yes,
COVID.
Yes, moving away. Because we've been discussing COVID, the COVID-19 pandemic for so long. Nadeem brought up the issue on the efficacy of Parliament, I believe, in a question that he posed to MP Iran Wickremesinghe in controlling this pandemic. I'd like to move on to one of the inherent duties of Parliament, which is to draft legislation. And one of the most important pieces of legislation that that could be a cornerstone of Sri Lanka's development is currently being processed in the parliamentary process. I'm speaking specifically about the Port City Economic Commission Bill. Now, when the previous government was in power, and they drafted the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, many other free trade agreements. There were many allegations from the opposition at the time, which was the joint opposition, the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, that there isn't enough discussions. There is no transparency. And I can distinctly remember MP Lakshman Kiriella, who was in the government at the time, coming out and after the Singapore-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement was signed, coming out and saying, you know, we made a mistake, we didn't consult the relevant parties, but, you know, next time we will. And the opposition at the time was extremely critical about this. However, we see the sides being switched and the opposition repeating the same mistake, this time in government, in the drafting of the Port City Economic Commission Bill. I'm not talking about the merits of the bill, I'm not talking about the content of it, because obviously that is very hard to digest. And that requires broad discussion. This is a question on the creation of that space for the discussion. I mean, when the bill was first placed on the Gazette, it was placed during the time when the courts were on holidays. And the legal professionals did not have enough time to go through this bill and to challenge it in court. That, okay, let's say that was done by chance, that was not deliberate. However, the second one...
One day too.
Exactly. And let's just say that that was just a stroke of fate that happened by chance.
No, that did not happen with a stroke of fate, because that Monday was given as a holiday.
As a public holiday as well.
A public holiday by
but
the
just
government.
giving the benefit of doubt to the government. But however, all doubts are cleared when the government scheduled the debate on this bill again on the 5th of May. The special determination is due to come only on the 4th of May. This bill is going to be discussed in one day. Leaving aside all the merits of the bill, this bill may be the best bill that Sri Lanka ever has, right? But still, space for debate, because a simple word, a simple clause can compromise the sovereignty of Sri Lanka. Do you believe that Parliament is given enough time? Do you have enough time to study this bill,
No.
Professor Tisavitana? As a member of the government, have you been fighting for more time to debate this in Parliament?
Certainly not. And I think really much more time should have been given. It's an important bill, and it should have been, shall we say, ensured that there was sufficient time for the public. We say there's 1 week given legally, constitutionally, for the public to make representations to courts regarding any bill. That should have been provided. Secondly, another week during which we could debate and discuss this, and then come to a conclusion regarding the bill. And I'm afraid the time given is totally inadequate.
Professor Tarana, why was the Chinese defense minister in the country?
Sorry?
The Chinese defense minister, Wei Fenghe, he came and he signed a military assistance protocol. What is it an agreement? What does that mean? Why was he in the country, Professor
No, now let me tell you this, right? There is this China phobia, right, which has afflicted the people of this country largely through the media, right? And if I tell you quite clearly that China has advanced, and now even the IMF has said that as an economy it is overtaking America and becoming the #1 economy. Purely by trade. It didn't conquer any country, it didn't subjugate any people, right? It didn't in its history play the role of an imperialist country, right? So there is nothing to fear dealing with China.
No, Professor,
right? The fact that China offers goods cheaper than what our own producers offer, or what even other country producers offer, makes them able to sell their goods here.
But if it is related to trade, why not the trade minister? Why was the defense minister here?
Sorry?
If it is related to trade, why not the trade minister was here, Professor? Why was the defense minister here, and why did he sign a protocol called the military assistance?
Okay, we have friendly relations with various countries. We have friendly relations with China, right? And there are if China is going to come and establish in this port city area for a long-term lease, they have also got a long-term lease in Hambantota. There are questions involving the defense arrangements which have to be discussed between the two countries.
Professor
and I don't see anything wrong with that.
So what you initially
and just
said,
for your information, you see, because in case you are also afflicted with China phobia.
Can you blame me though, Professor?
Right. That America has 403 military bases all around China, able to attack every important city in China. China does not have a single around anywhere close to America or to any of the other countries. It has one that is in Djibouti because of the pirates attacking their ships going up and down there.
But
Professor,
China
this
did the same thing to Djibouti as well when they were about to set up an economic zone, if I'm not mistaken. The same procedure was followed in Djibouti as well, Professor.
Yeah.
They don't have a good track record.
No, one.
No, but
One.
Professor, just to add to what Azra is saying, China is not concerned about the US. China is concerned about India, Professor. That is why they want to set up shop in Colombo.
No, that's not the reason. You see, they had this old silk.
The One Belt, One Road initiative.
Yeah, one belt, traditional trade route, and they have now reintroduced it, and Sri Lanka plays a pivotal part in that trade route.
Professor, wrong analogy, I think. The One Belt, One Road initiative came about because India was not allowing China to build a rail track from India connecting China. That is the reason. That is why they had to come to Sri Lanka.
No. I'm sorry, I disagree with you, because this whole arrangement has been well planned long time ago, right? And they were trying to go north of India, Tibet and so on.
But due to the One Belt, One Road initiative that was initiated in China a few years ago, only the Indian diplomat or the Indian Prime Minister was not present. All the other countries who were signatories or were part of this initiative were present at this event a few years ago.
The fact of the matter is that India is no longer a part of the Asian, shall we say, combination of countries,
right,
and lacks the spirit of Asia. I'm sorry to have to say this. The Americans have set up a system called the Quad. Now that basis of that is the Indo-Pacific rim of countries. All along in history, Asia has been regarded as one continent, as one entity. Americas were regarded as something completely different, separated by the Pacific Ocean. The Indian Ocean was the ocean related to Asia on the west, and the Pacific on the east, but the two were separated. America linked the two together and came up with this Indo-Pacific Ocean concept, and that enabled them to establish the Quad. America, Australia, Japan and India. And India is an essential cog of that whole setup. And there are, you would have seen the newspaper reports, including Washington Post and the New York Times, where authors like Pilger, the war correspondents, have been talking and mentioning of how there are various people in America who are talking of having a regime change in China.
Right.
That whole concept of a regime change is the motivation of America setting up the MCC agreement and the SOFA agreement with Sri Lanka. Fortunately, there was a change of government. Our government came in. If the UNP was in power still, we would have now become a neo-colony of America as well as a military base of America.
Now, that's a strong allegation, Iran, against the UNP or the SJB at this time.
It
Because
is.
we saw the manner in which
It is.
Sajid Premadasa even had a backdoor meeting with the American ambassador, with the Australian ambassador, with the Canadian ambassador, when the Chinese defense minister was arriving in the
EU
country.
delegation.
What was discussed at this meeting?
I'll tell you in a minute. But I was very interested to hear Professor Vitarana saying that we shouldn't have a China phobia. It's very relieving to hear it from him, because that we shouldn't have a China phobia. It's very relieving to hear it from him, who is the leader of the LSSP, the party who basically from the 1930s came to the forefront of the Sri Lanka's independence movement against colonialism. Now, colonialism doesn't have colors. Colonialism is to do with basically being powerful, right? Economically powerful countries, right, which have the wherewithal, and then basically they look at countries which are in a very weak state and they exploit it in one way or the other. The old tools and the new tools are different in the game. Hard power, soft power today, and so forth. And it was also interesting to hear Professor Vitharan say that the Chinese are producing goods very, very cheaply, and why are Sri Lankan businessmen or consumers grumbling when you could have it cheaply? So I'm also glad to hear that, because it shows that the party is going through some transition, because they believe in competition. So it doesn't matter again who the manufacturer is, whether it is black skin, brown skin, yellow skin, doesn't really matter. So that's the kind of message that I was really hearing. The way we look at it is like this: Sri Lanka is a small island.
That transformation is good.
Well, of course, we should welcome it. You see, we should welcome it if that transformation is happening, because we had a lot of opposition to that transformation for decades, and if the transformation is happening. Now, the way we will look at it is like this: Sri Lanka is a small island. We have to be fiercely independent. We've had nearly 500 years of colonial domination, but Western colonial domination. We don't want neo-colonialism in any way after that 500 years of experience. We want to be independent and fiercely independent. It doesn't matter which government is in power in this country, as long as the people of this country have selected the government of their choice. And that's where we should be. So what is our defense against it? Our defense against it is going to be our foreign policy, because ultimately, and I think Mrs. Bandaranaike, and I must say to the credit at that time, with the non-aligned movement and the concepts coming out of the non-aligned movement, I think that is really the foundational foreign policy of Sri Lanka. And I think that we should continue down that road, irrespective of who is actually in power and which government is in power, and that we should fiercely protect. So when there's a government in power, right, and when we are in opposition, we need to hold the government responsible to make sure. We have friends around the world. Whatever said and done, we are importing from few countries, right, and we are exporting to the other countries. And we need to protect not just the markets we are importing from. That is easier. You don't need to really protect it. There are enough people who will want to sell goods and services to you. But your export markets, you need to expand. And our export markets are in Europe, our export markets are in the US, and our export markets are elsewhere. So we need to make sure that we maintain friendly relationships with all these countries, these friendly relationships. Therefore, I would say, you asked me the question about what's the SJB's position, right? Certainly our position is to maintain these friendly relationships. We saw lots of the foreign diplomats in this country. We haven't finished that. We will continue to see the others, because we couldn't see some of them during that period, but we'll continue to see the others. And we have a clear message that we want to protect our markets. We also want to build on our relationships. And we also have made an appeal. We have made an appeal for these countries to support the Sri Lankan government, particularly with the COVID crisis.
No, but what was that meeting about? Sajid Premadasa, the opposition leader, meeting ambassadors of several powerful nations.
Yeah, so that's a meeting I'm referring to, because I was there myself in all those meetings. I was there myself, you see. So our whole idea in those meetings...
weren't these ambassadors concerned about China's defense minister arriving in the country?
No, no. Yeah, actually, I must say that that was not even discussed during the meeting. We didn't even discuss that issue because certainly, I mean, the Chinese have a relationship with this country and that relationship is being built. So there was no discussion about it. We talked about
just a routine meeting.
Yes, we talked about building our other relationships, and we are clearly signaling that those countries and those markets was very important. You know, we don't have the vaccine. We are not getting the vaccine from China. We are not getting the vaccine from India now. Indians are committed to give it, but even that there is an uncertainty, right? The countries that actually have the AstraZeneca vaccine and have more than they need for their own populations, also some of the other countries who have produced it. So we need to maintain a relationship with all of these people, because Sri Lanka, we must, it's our citizens that come first, and we believe strongly, right, that we need to build relationships with all these countries and maintain it for different reasons and for different geopolitical reasons.
Professor Vitarna, when talking about...
Nadim, with your permission, I want to pose a question to Mr. Gunasekara, sure, and then we can speak to Professor Vitarna momentarily. Mr. Gunasekara, the position of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party with regard to China, because your leader, Maithripala Sirisena, was someone who took a firm decision against even the port city when he was elected as a president of the country. However, the Chinese government doesn't seem to be that much concerned about the former president himself and his activities. What is the position of Maithripala Sirisena or the Sri Lanka Freedom Party in terms of the Chinese intervention right now that is taking place?
When you say intervention?
Intervention in terms of the defense minister coming to Sri Lanka. The defense minister himself has a close tie with Pakistan. He's been visiting Pakistan on a number of occasions. In fact, he's been honored as a very close friend of the Pakistani government as well. Sri Lanka, there is many opposition parties saying, what is the reason for someone at that stature to visit Sri Lanka at a point of this? But we all know he didn't visit the port city. I don't know whether he visited off his time schedule or not, but we know that it was not in the business of his agenda at that time. So what is the position of the SLFP?
Well, for your information, I mean, the Chinese premier visited this country is much more powerful than the defense secretary. Chinese premier visited this country, not once, twice. So I don't think, I mean, as far as Sri Lanka Freedom Party is concerned, we will have discussions with regard to this Port Economic Commission bill, and we will try to see as to what changes could be introduced.
But do you think a day's debate is sufficient?
No, certainly not. I said it, I reiterate that again. I mean, I still feel that these are
the alliance parties with the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. We see a number of smaller parties that are in alliance with the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna now having discussions with the Sri Lanka Freedom Party separately. What is their stance regarding the time period that has been granted for this debate? Because it's just not the time period that has been granted for the Port City Economic Bill debate. Do you really have enough time to analyze this?
No, certainly not. No, the question is this, you know, now when I can still remember when we were there, there was this very important case where the Human Rights Commission bill was placed before Parliament. We objected. We objected to the Speaker, then Speaker K.B. Ratnayaka, and said it never came before the Consultative Committee. So the Speaker asked Richard Patirana, the leader of the House, was that correct? So he said yes. Then you send it back to the Consultative Committee. So it went back to the Consultative Committee, and it was debated. It was explosive debate in the Consultative Committee.
No, at that time,
yeah, but
the parliamentary system was more democratic.
Yeah, but the question is this:
not anymore.
I can't understand as to why the Economic Commission bill did not go to the Consultative Committee before it is being presented to Parliament.
But Mr. Gunasekara, can you assure us that the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will take a stand against this and stand for democracy? Because similar sentiments were echoed even on this program by representatives of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party when it came to the 20th Amendment to the Constitution.
When you say stand, when you say stand, what you're expecting is to say, okay, we decide finally, no, we are not going to do this.
Materialistic, something material, something that will change, something beyond the mere statement.
I mean, you just heard him. We will keep on pressing, we keep on knocking. That's all that we can do.
What is the CPR? You keep on pressing and hope the man will live.
What else?
Professor, on this topic of keeping on knocking, we know that...
Keeping on pressing, Nadi.
Keeping on pressing, let's say. We know that last week there was to be a meeting of the party leaders of the alliance, the SLPP-led alliance. And eventually many party leaders, I assume including yourself as head of the LSSP, had boycotted this meeting because the SLPP contingent numbered about 50 to 60 members, including backbenchers from the SLPP. Do you feel that, as an alliance member, do you feel that the SLPP is using intimidation tactics against the constituent parties in their alliance? I mean, if you rock up to a meeting with 50 or 60 people, that is intimidation, isn't it?
Shall I say that it is totally unfair. It's an unbalanced situation where we wanted a small forum where people, the party leaders are just not individuals. They represent the policies of those parties and the people behind them. And therefore, we have different points of view, right? And we would like to express those points of view on an important issue like this. And for some reason, we are not being given that opportunity. So, which is unfortunate. I strongly object to this line of action. I think that things should be done much more democratically and fairly, and the fact that shall we say, almost 2/3 of the population voted for the SLPP-led alliance. Majority of those who got in were from the SLPP, right? It has given them a position of power which I hope will not go to their head.
Professor Vitarna, this meeting has been rescheduled for tomorrow because of the opposition that the individual party leaders had. If I understand it correctly, including the Communist Party, the LSSP, SLFP being one of the larger partners, then the EPDP, etc. So there are about 14 or 15 parties that are part of parties or groups that are part of that alliance.
11 parties,
11 parties.
And maybe about 3 groups.
Now tomorrow, if the SLPP again, if the SLPP contingent again numbers in the 50s or 60s, will you attend that meeting?
I left that meeting where we were discussing this to come here. I expressed my view there. But I hope we'll be able to reach a consensus and come to a common position. If we come to a common position where let me be frank on this issue and say that I suggested that we should meet the Prime Minister before the parliamentary group, which is scheduled to meet at 12 noon tomorrow, meets, and put it very squarely to him and say, we want not a meeting with 60 or 70 SLPP people present.
You want a party
but
leaders
a meeting which is really a party leaders meeting.
Professor Vitarana, when you see this issue, we were talking about both you and Mr. Gunasekara saying, you know, we're part of an alliance, we have to keep pressing, we have to keep negotiating. But it would seem that the SLPP component of that alliance, the major stakeholder, is more interested in strongman tactics, in these intimidation tactics, and they don't really, let's say, have the same degree of esteem or respect for the leaders of the parties in their alliance.
Yes, I'm afraid that seems.
So how can you keep pressing when you're not? I mean, in any negotiation, you have to be on you have to have some kind of footing to press your point. It would seem that the alliance partners, the SLFP included, do not have that footing.
That's why I told you that I hope that we can come to a consensus where we act as a group and exert pressure on the Prime Minister. Because we have appealed once to him, right? And we expected him to respect his promise and have a meeting with us.
I want to pose this question to both Mr. Gunasekara as well as Professor Vitarana. Who is more approachable? Is it the President or the Prime Minister?
Who is more approachable?
Approachable. Or none of them are approachable at the moment?
No, I don't know, because I don't approach either of them.
No, at least your party, in terms of...
I'll have to ask them and inform them.
Let's ask Professor Vitarana, because you're the leader of the LSSP.
When we were not having the regular weekly meetings of party leaders that Mahinda Rajapaksa had when he was president, and after the 2015 change and so on, when there were the elections, just after the current president was elected, at that general election, the massive vote that the SLPP-led alliance got, right? From that time onwards, there has been a, shall I say, attitude, if I put it in a nutshell.
Shift in attitude.
A shift in attitude, which can be put in a maybe children's language.
Arrogance.
We can manage without you. So,
yeah.
Well, we have to see whether that is really the situation.
Right.
Right? And we are now in the process of trying to get together the other parties, to get together.
Does that mean
exert some degree of pressure?
Does that mean...
though numerically we are weak.
Professor, does that mean that the President is unapproachable?
No.
No.
Let me tell you, sorry, I left out something which, when the meetings were not taking place with the Prime Minister, we went and complained. Really, we first complained over the 20th Amendment, and then he gave us the assurance that he would bring those changes in with the new constitution. And then the second time when we went and said we are not having these weekly meetings, then he said he will have a weekly meeting if we want. And we have compromised by agreeing to have a meeting once in 2 weeks.
With the Prime Minister?
With the President.
With the President.
So we are having that.
Mr. Wickramaratne, on the political front, the opposition leader and SAB leader, Sajid Premadasa, has announced a political ceasefire, saying that we need to come together to help the country at this moment. What does Mr. Sajid Premadasa mean by a political ceasefire between becoming opposition leader and now? Has he really been, all guns blazing in opposing the government? What fire is being seized is my question.
Certainly we have been opposing the government, right? And you can see that, I think, in the results. I don't think you have had a president basically being brought down in his popularity in such a short time, and a government who is largely seen to have failed in such a short time. It's only 8 months. This government is only 8 months, and the president hasn't even completed 2 years. So in that sense, we have. It's sometimes seen as opposition is not very active on the street, and there's a good reason for that. And the reason for that is basically circumstances have changed. It's COVID, public meetings can't be held, and politicians are in a different position. If you go, it's wrong. If you don't go, it's wrong as well. You see, and so therefore you're continuously looking at this. I think the word ceasefire is probably misunderstood there. The COVID is at its height at the moment, right? And we took a decision that we certainly are not going to be actively engaged in public activity and political activity over the next 2 weeks. That we want to do everything possible to support the government to overcome the COVID crisis. This crisis is so serious, right, that a week ago, when I checked, we were reporting about 100 positive cases. At that time, the experts told me that it was 3 to 5 times bigger, but because of the under-testing, right, that number was not showing up. Now we are talking about 2,000 positive cases a day, right? We have 750 ICU beds. There's
all occupied.
No availability.
Mr. Vikram, to be fair by Mr. Sajid Premadasa, he was one of the first MPs, let alone party leaders, to speak about the threat of COVID and the possibility of a pandemic hitting Sri Lanka way back in November of 2019, shortly after the presidential election. But since then, since initially raising this issue, the messaging that we've seen coming from the opposition leader has been very sort of patchy, and there have been instances where he followed the example of the former US President Donald Trump in recommending a certain medication, hydroxychloroquine, I believe. There have been instances. He seems to be a little scatterbrained in how he's approaching his role as opposition leader in this time of crisis.
I don't agree with you. I mean, I'm not referring to any specific comment that he made or anything like that. But he has been very consistent. As you said, he was the first one who talked about the pandemic. He talked about importing of face masks and things like that. I didn't completely agree with my colleagues on this side of the table, because, in this situation, who takes the blame? Does government take the blame? Do the people take the blame? Now, non-pharmaceutical things need to be done. Washing your hands, keeping your distance, wearing your face mask, those needs to be done. And I agree with that. The public example needs to be kept by those in authority, like ministers, our families. We didn't see that in Nuwarile this week, even with the Rajapaksa family, right? Those are things that we need to actually do, right? I agree with that, right? But I think that you can't only put it on the public, you see. It's also to do with decisions that the government actually takes. So Sajid Premadasa is in the forefront. If you look at his parliamentary interventions, you will actually see that, right? Then we've been talking about the vaccines non-stop. Now we are talking about the ICU beds and the ICU units of bringing of field hospitals. If the experts say these things, that the government should give it. What we have said in the ceasefire is we will support the measures that are being taken with the COVID, because this can escalate. Today they have a graph showing today that the escalation rate in Sri Lanka is higher than in India. This is really, really dangerous. This is really dangerous. We can lose our parents or our grandparents. or now even younger people are being. So what happened was, because the government made an early claim that everything was under control, we are the best in the world, everybody went into this relaxed mode, you see, and there was under-testing that was going on. Now we are all exposed, you see. So what he means by that is, on this issue, we are going to support the government because the people's lives are at risk.
Now, Mr. Wickrama, very quickly, for the benefit of our viewers, you mentioned, if you take a look at the parliamentary interventions that Sajid Premadasa has done, his consistency is clear. For the benefit of our viewers, could you mention what some of these parliamentary interventions that the opposition leader has done are?
Yeah, so on the vaccine, he has been completely right along on the vaccine, on the corona pandemic, on what should be done. On those things, he has always stood right up. He has stood right. He has stood up also on some of the other issues, right? Particularly on the issues of the space on democracy and on human rights, right? He has stood. When you know, they were saying that, you know, those who were died but who were regarded as COVID deaths, that they should be cremated rather than being buried, right? The party took a stand, Sajid Premadasa took a stand, and Sajid Premadasa said, no, there is no scientific evidence to show that they need to be cremated, they must be buried, right? So he stood out, while the government used all its forces to say, no, no. Even the World Health Organization said that there's no problem in actually burying people. Ultimately, what happens, right? They just delayed it. They deprived people of their human rights, people who want to make a decision. On a decision of whether you should be cremated or you should be buried, I keep telling people, to me it makes no difference. But to some people it makes all the difference, because it's related to their beliefs. That's a violation of human rights. Sajid Premadasa stood strong there, right? On that issue, he stood strong there. Right, on the issue, even on the issue of the Human Rights Council, right, we've taken the position, right, that human rights are vital. This is not to take away from the accomplishments of the Sri Lankan armed forces, but everywhere there are individuals, whether it's in parliament, whether it's civil servants, whether it's in the armed forces, whether it's in the police, there are individuals, right, who basically violate the law. They must be answerable. Right, and we have stood on that. So Sajid Premadasa has consistently taken these issues up.
Sharon, do you have any questions for panelists?
I wanted to raise a question from Dr. Manchanayake. We straight away back into the coronavirus issue, but coming back to this issue on the Port City Economic Commission bill, how does the UNP, what really is the UNP stance on this matter? I know that this bill has been challenged by a representative of the United National Party in court. But what is your stance for the knowledge, of course, of the general public who are watching right now? What is the stance of the UNP on the Port City Economic Commission bill, and how do you plan on, well, making the amendments that you need, that you want to see in this bill in Parliament when this is passed?
Yes, since we are not in the parliaments, but we have given the good courts and we have filed a case, and in the public clearly we can announce. So anyway, this SJB is in the parliament, so we can support them to get the parliament to amend it. So that's the only way we can do at the moment.
Right.
So by the time our whoever the representative is go to the parliament in June, if it is still there, so then we can get this thing done. So anyway, UNP is always like, you know, we are against it. So we will support the entire opposition to get them amend the bill.
And Shamir, just one final question from Professor Tisavitharana. Professor, I was just I just searched a couple of news articles to check the number of days that were allocated for the debate on the report of the Presidential Commission on Political Victimization. There were 2 days allocated in Parliament for the debate of this report. However, coming back to what I said, I know you agreed with me, but I'm trying to understand the thinking behind the government's allocation of 1 day for the debate of this extremely important piece of legislation that could make or break the economy of Sri Lanka. I mean, to the general public, at least, it's a no-brainer. But attending the meetings of the government, attending the party leaders' meeting, what really is the justification of the government for allocating only 1 day? I know you are against this, but what is the justification on the part of the government, since you are a representative of the government?
Well, I have no say in the matter.
But what is the thinking of the government? What is the thinking? Because
unfortunately, as far as we are concerned, we are for the Port City bill with certain amendments.
Right.
In fact, today we discussed some of those amendments.
No, content of the bill aside, discussion.
We see there is nothing to fear with regard to the port city itself, right? And this whole concept of port cities, China has 4 port cities per se, and 7 harbors with port cities.
But Professor Thisavitharana, previously also, you were...
So it's a established success story in which has helped China to come up.
But they've never had
economically.
Professor.
Right, so,
we had a representative of Port City last week on our show, and he admitted that China has not had an outside financial hub in the caliber of the Port City ever so far. So this success story has not been exploited by the Chinese government thus far.
No, but
they have within their country.
We are modeling it on what they have done.
Yeah.
We are working together with them.
Professor, but besides the fact that we are working with them,
we are modeling it based on Dubai and Singapore.
You think only the Chinese can succeed? Why can't the Sri Lankans succeed?
No, Professor, we can succeed. We can succeed, and we hope we succeed. But this piece of legislation, I mean, I'm just trying to draw a comparison. I mean, the report on political victimization gets a 2-day debate in Parliament, and this important piece of legislation that I once again say can make or break the economy of Sri Lanka gets just a 1-day debate in Parliament. What is the justification? There's no justification on your part.
Okay. I have no say in that matter.
Okay.
I would have been happy if 2 days were given for the discussion.
Right.
Right. But I think you are probably exaggerating the magnitude of the threat from
Professor, even before you mentioned the fact that this China phobia, you spoke about a China phobia, and you said it's propagated by the media. I find that to be a little bit hard to believe, because I see it, the way I see it, it's more on the side of the questionable decisions that have been taken by consecutive governments. Because when you see in Hambantota, the massive convention centers that they've built, the Hambantota port, then we have the Mattala airport that doesn't have any planes. We see continuously Chinese investment coming into Sri Lanka and no return on investment. There is no return on investment. So what the general public sees when we report on these matters, of course, based on facts, is the fact that the Chinese are coming to Sri Lanka, they're giving us loans, our loans are increasing, we have no return, we don't have a way to pay it, they take our assets.
No.
That's just a clarification on your accusation on media of propagating this.
And Mattala and all that, right? Mattala, in fact, the party involved is India, right? Now, where this port city is concerned, there have been, to my knowledge, very detailed discussions with the Chinese authorities over a period of time where they have studied the whole concept, right? Got the advice of Chinese experts, got the shall we say, engineering support, etc., from the Chinese side, and they are going ahead with the setting up of the port city.
So according to what you're saying, the government is extremely open for detailed, in-depth discussions with their Chinese counterparts on modeling the Colombo port city, than giving that same length of discussions to the policymakers who have been elected by the general public of Sri Lanka in Parliament.
Well, I mean, the opposition is being given
1 day.
One day, yeah, but that.
So thank you very much,
because
Sean.
there isn't that much to criticize.
There isn't that, in the opinion of the government.
We have to leave it at that because we need to go for the final round. But Sharan, in the defense of Professor Tissavitharana would love to say, I wish I had a say. I wish I had a say. So we're going for a short commercial break. When we come back, it's the final round. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We are talking about Sri Lanka's current political climate with an emphasis on COVID-19. Stay connected, stay with Face the Nation. We will be right back. Welcome back. It's Face the Nation, the final round. Our topic of discussion is Sri Lanka's current political climate with an emphasis on COVID-19. We start off the final round with Dr. Kitsiri Manchanayake, representing the United National Party. Your time starts now.
Samir, what I had to say is, now we have talked about many subjects, but the current is the COVID-19. So we like to urge the government to manage it properly, listen to all the experts who are in the medical field and do the needful for the country. Now vaccination, we need vaccination. I can remember in the November 25th, there was the parliament decision to get 4.2 for underquacks. But unfortunately, they have signed the agreement in January 8th. So therefore, we got only 240,000. So that means those type of errors government is doing. Government is not taking any decisions in proper time and proper way. So therefore, I would like to forget about all the political differences, and this is a very bad time we all are facing in the country. So get the proper people into the particular teams and try and get this, we'll all together, we'll request the government, we'll all together, we'll face this situation, we'll try to avoid, to wipe out this COVID-19 from Sri Lanka. So therefore, as United National Party, we will give the fullest support and the cooperation to the government to get out of this COVID situation.
And you just wish there was a representative in the parliament.
Come again?
You just wish there was a representative in parliament.
Of course. I think I also feel before I come to this event, I spoke to my leader.
COVID-19 will be going on.
No, Professor. No. I just spoke to my leader before I come to this event. I said, this is going to be a very burning question. I'm going to get what is it? Yeah, we said now we
every week when you're here, Kitsiri.
Sorry.
Every time when you are here, we discuss about
but that's then because the working committee is as soon as it's the working committee, we will be probably June is our target time, so we'll be see a UNP representative in June.
But knowing the leader Ranil Wickremesinghe and myself, having interviewed him a couple of times, the only thing that I could say in Sinhala is there's an idiom, Balagiri dosha adaname heta. So it will,
I don't. I mean, anyway, we'll see. For the hopes of this.
Until it happens, I'll take it.
So I have got feeling the June. Before end of June or first week of July, before that, this will happen.
We now move our attention to Mr. Kesararaj Gunasekara, a former Member of Parliament, Councillor at Devila Mount Lane Municipal Council.
Shamil, there is one thing that has to be established for a vibrant democracy. You need a very strong opposition. And in that backdrop, if the government members are too high, then some of the members of the government also must be part of the opposition. I always believe in that. And therefore, members of the government must come out and say, look here, certain things are not happening and therefore we need change. I don't see that happening. I don't know whether it is happening behind closed doors, but I don't see it happening openly. That's a very bad sign, because one fine day you'll realize you're in serious trouble, but that will be too late in the day. So I would advise the government to take cognizance of what is happening on. Even the social media You must understand that you can't fight the social media. How can you fight social media? They're very, very strong. You will always have miscreants in any group. That will always be there. But don't forget one thing, the social media is very strong and they come out with hard-hitting messages. Take those messages on. You got to understand, because you are failing, they are becoming stronger. They cannot become stronger if you're being successful. When you're not successful, only they become stronger. Take that message. It's very clear. And then adjust yourself. That's very important. And number two, leave this COVID fighting to the experts. Now, Professor Siswitharan has, I don't think, even been consulted. Experts? Why? Why are you making mistakes? The other day, very recently, we had this 28th death anniversary Dane at a temple, which we have every year. The Nayakatero, he is the Secretary General of the Asian Buddhist Congress. You know what he said? We have come to a situation where we don't have ministers of the caliber of Lalitha Mudali. When he developed the port of Colombo, he was not thinking of getting assistance from anywhere. He was not interested in privatization. What rubbish. He wanted to develop it and have that as an asset of the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. Unfortunately, today we don't have ministers of that caliber, and we are suffering and the country is suffering. Mind you, these are priests who have worked solidly for the establishment of this administration. Now, that's very clear. So, everybody needs to understand that the going is very bad. You have to understand that you have to make changes, and if you don't make the correct changes, you are in serious trouble, and that trouble will come last minute.
Mr. Gunasekara, one final question to you. Why is it that members of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, one of the largest constituent parties of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, identify the government as a separate entity?
Identify the government
as a separate entity, because usually when you have an alliance, when we say the government is incorporated with these constituent parties. However, every single time we pose a question to you or we pose a question to Professor Vitharana, you all absolve yourself from the government.
No.
And say the government is responsible.
I said we are part of the government.
So you are responsible.
We are part of the government.
Yeah.
There are no two words about that. But if there are certain things which are happening which needs to be corrected, we have to tell that it has to be corrected. That's our role.
Right. Thank you very much.
That's a role.
Thank you
I always believe in one thing. For a democracy to work, you need a very, very strong opinion. That is why 94 government, one member difference in the government and the opposition, but a very, very strong government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kesara Gunasekara, former Member of Parliament as well as currently Councillor of the Devula Mountain Municipal Council, Iran Wickramaratne, a Member of Parliament, Samaga Jana Balawega.
Yeah, I would like to say something on the Port City bill. We know that it has been in the courts, and there will be a determination sent to Parliament, and tomorrow we will know about it. And that will be to see about the constitutionality of the bill. So I can only comment based on the bill. We don't know all the amendments that the government is going to move and so forth. The bill is totally unacceptable. The bill violates the sovereignty of the people. This company that is being formed, it's called a port commission, but the word commission is misleading. It's actually a corporate body. And this corporate body is going to be foreign owned the way it is presently in the bill. Now whether that's going to change or not, we won't know till we hear it tomorrow. If you look at the composition of the board, right, or what they call commissioners in it, right, these commissioners are all appointed by the president. So the president can appoint anybody he likes, right? There is no constitutional council or anything like that. There are no standing members. When we envisage the port city, we envisage the board with standing members, the governor of the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, the UDA head, 5 standing members, and only the president could appoint 3. Here, 5 to 7 members are appointed by the president, and the president could even appoint foreigners onto this. There is no restriction in the bill. And if that happens, foreign interests could be aligned with what's happening there. Then when you look at it in terms of the judicial powers that are given there, when you look at the powers for owning land, for powers for registering businesses, powers for giving banking licenses, powers to regulate the financial industry, all being taken away from the Sri Lankan authorities, including the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. So this bill, in short, if I say, in its present form is totally unacceptable, and it violates the sovereignty of the people, and therefore we will oppose it. I would also go further and say that if this is passed in a hurry, and if it violates the sovereignty of the people, this government will change in 3 years. Governments in Sri Lanka change. We will reverse some of those provisions. We said that in 2014, when this government had an arrangement with China in filling the land, because we said we are not willing for freehold land to be sold to foreigners. And it took 1 year since we came into office to reverse it, to renegotiate with the Chinese government so that land could only be given in lease. So therefore we would urge the government that to follow proper procedure. They rushed it, they're trying to rush it in a day, and this is such an important bill. This bill should not be rushed. Why are they rushing this bill? Naturally it causes concern. It causes concern to many, many people. We can't even discuss this with the stakeholders. How could our lawyers see this? How could we propose amendments to this bill when it is only we will know what the judiciary says only tomorrow? So that's on the bill. And then I would like just make a final comment on the COVID itself. On this, on the COVID issue, public health depends on public trust, and that's very important. We've seen a lack of responsibility. We have seen more recently the Ukrainian tourist bubble. We have seen, right, how the borders have been opened. We have seen, what we saw in Nuwara just this past week, and some of this has been referred to here. Irresponsible ways in which this is being handled. 700 lives have been lost. We know in the Easter bombing, 260 lives were lost. 700 lives have been lost here. Somebody definitely has to take responsibility. We can't just blame all the people and say, oh, the people are responsible. We have to take responsibility if we are in government. For things we have done by omission or commission, we have to take responsibility. So this needs to be reversed. We are going to support the government. The vaccine needs to be brought. Everybody should be vaccinated. It should be a vaccine which is approved by the WHO and the NMRA Specialist Committee in Sri Lanka. We are also telling the government, don't wait, move quickly, increase capacity, particularly in HDUs and in ICUs and so forth, getting ventilators, getting oxygen, right, getting all the medication that is necessary. Don't wait till the crisis deepens. And we will fully support the government, because this is a big challenge facing the country at this moment.
Thank you very much, Iran Wickramaratne, Member of Parliament of the Samag Jana Balawegaya, Professor Tissa Vitarana, Member of Parliament, Sri Lanka, Podu Jana Peramuna.
First, I must thank both the UNP and SJP, sorry if I didn't, for taking a supportive attitude in relation to the COVID-19 crisis. In fact, when I met, when we had the health parliamentary committee meeting where I was able to express myself, one of the first proposals I made was to set up a committee of parliament's leaders, the political party leaders, to act in cooperation with the health authorities in the country, so that we have one team effort as a nation to fight this threat. And that unfortunately was also not accepted by the minister. So I'm glad about the stand that these two parties are taking on this issue. There are, when you compare Sri Lanka with most of the other countries, even developed, highly developed countries like UK, the EU countries, America, right? We are way ahead of them in relation to our control of COVID-19. We did very well during the first phase, and the second phase, where we had some setbacks, but when you compare with the other countries, we are still way ahead of them. Now, it is very unfortunate that over this New Year period in particular, there was an attitude of complacency and the necessary leadership was not given by the government to let people get people to understand the gravity of the problem, and also the fact that the actions of the people that mattered. The health education project which I put to the minister, if that had been implemented within 1 week or maybe 2 weeks at the most, with all the media facilities that we have, the capabilities that we have, we would have been able to educate from the little child up to the oldest person about the danger that the COVID-19 spreading in the community has for everybody, and that each person must protect themselves by the 3 health practices: the mask, distancing, and frequent washing of your hands, especially if you touch some surface that someone else may have touched. Now, that message could very well have been put through. I proposed it 4 months ago, but it was not accepted. All I can say is, I'm sorry. If it had been accepted, perhaps we would have been like the first round winners of the second round and the third round.
Thank you very much, Professor Tisavitarana, Member of Parliament of the Sri Lanka Pojana Peramuna. Would you or will you be saying a few months from now, Professor, only if they listen to us? Would you have to say that?
Hope not. I hope not.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Kitsiri Manchanayaka, Iran Vikramaratne, Professor Tisavitarana, as well as Kesaralal Gunasekar for joining us this evening on Face the Nation, even putting your life at somewhat risk, because at the end of the day, educating the public is far more important at this given time. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us on Face the Nation tonight. Thank you very much, Nadim. Thank you very much, Azra, as well as Shalan, for joining us on the show. Azra is the silent individual who puts the panelists together every week, day in and day out. So if you have any criticism on the panelists, she's the one to catch. So I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. I like the way that everyone is trying to take the role of the moderator now. But
I
support her fully.
Same here, same here.
Thank you very much for the gentleman and the lady for joining us this evening on the show. As always, I leave you tonight with a quote, as I always do. The best years of your life are the ones in which you decide your problems are your own. You do not blame them on your mother, not politicians, and certainly not the president. You realize that you control your own destiny, and hence be prudent in all the decisions that you take. Wash your hands, wear the mask, and maintain social distancing. because you are on your own. Take care and good night.